The galaxy respected power, but it never knew what to do with kindness. The warning siren echoed through the cargo bay as Ethan Walker tightened the last bolt on a malfunctioning atmospheric filter aboard Outpost Meridian, a remote mining station hanging above the frozen moon of Carth 9. The metallic floor vibrated beneath his boots. Somewhere beyond the reinforced walls, engines groaned against the endless pressure of the station's aging systems. Ethan wiped grease from his hands and glanced through a narrow observation window. Outside, a storm of glittering ice crystals drifted across the blackness of space like silver dust. It had been 8 months since he had left Earth. 8 months of 12-hour shifts, recycled air, and conversations mostly limited to maintenance reports and equipment failures. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a diplomat. He was just an engineer who fixed things when they broke. Usually machines. Sometimes people. The overhead speakers crackled to life. Attention, all personnel. Docking sequence commencing. Unscheduled vessel inbound. Ethan frowned. Unscheduled arrivals were rare this far from the core systems. Most captains avoided Carth. 9 unless they were desperate or lost. Curious, he headed toward the central transit corridor. The station felt unusually tense. Workers paused conversations. Security officers appeared near access points. Even the station manager, a woman famous for ignoring everything that didn't affect profits, stood near the arrival platform with crossed arms. Through the massive docking bay viewport, a sleek silver vessel emerged from the darkness. Its hull shimmered under floodlights, elegant and expensive compared to the industrial rust of Meridian Station. Ethan noticed something else. There were no visible military markings. No commercial logos either. The ship looked deliberately anonymous. The docking clamps locked with a heavy metallic thud. Steam hissed from pressure valves. The airlock door slowly opened. A group of tall alien attendants stepped out first, their dark uniforms immaculate despite the journey. Then the crowd fell silent. A woman emerged behind them. She stood nearly 7 feet tall. Her skin carried a faint bronze-gold glow beneath the artificial lights. Long silver hair rested over one shoulder. Her posture was regal, but there was something unusual about her expression. She looked tired, not physically tired, the deeper kind, the kind people carried behind their eyes. Ethan watched as several station officials rushed forward to greet her. The attendants immediately formed a protective circle. Whatever her identity was, it clearly mattered. "Who is she?" Ethan asked the technician beside him. The man lowered his voice. "No idea. But anyone traveling with that kind of security is either extremely important or extremely hated." Ethan chuckled softly. Maybe both. Before the technician could answer, the station lights flickered. Once, twice. Then half the docking bay plunged into darkness. A warning alarm sounded. Ethan immediately recognized the tone. "Power distribution failure." "You got to be kidding me," he muttered. The station manager looked horrified. Security teams scrambled. Several attendants instinctively moved closer to the mysterious woman. Ethan was already running toward an emergency maintenance panel. His fingers flew across the controls. The station's ancient power grid displayed a cascade of red warning symbols. One overloaded relay had triggered a chain reaction across multiple systems. "Come on," he whispered. "Stay together." Sweat formed along his forehead as he rerouted energy through secondary circuits. The lights flashed again, then stabilized. The alarms faded. Around the docking bay, relieved murmurs spread through the crowd. Ethan exhaled slowly and stepped back from the panel. Just another problem fixed. Just another day. When he turned around, he realized someone was watching him. The silver-haired woman stood several yards away. Her attendants appeared nervous, but she ignored them. For a brief moment, her violet eyes met his. There was no arrogance in them. No superiority. Only curiosity and something else. Relief. Then she offered the smallest smile. A quiet smile that somehow felt more genuine than all the official greetings she had received since arriving. Ethan nodded politely before returning to work. He never learned that day who she really was. He had no way of knowing that within a week, her name would appear on every news network in the galaxy. And he certainly had no idea that the simple act of fixing a broken station had just changed both of their lives forever. 3 days passed before Ethan Walker saw the silver-haired woman again. Outpost Meridian settled back into its usual rhythm of humming generators, maintenance requests, and endless system diagnostics. But rumors moved faster than cargo shipments. Every corridor carried a different version of the same story. Some claimed the visitor was a corporate executive from the inner systems. Others insisted she was a diplomat negotiating a mining treaty. A few believed she was royalty traveling in secret. Ethan ignored most of it. Rumors never repaired broken equipment. On the 4th morning, he was halfway inside a ventilation shaft on Deck 7 when his wrist communicator chirped. Maintenance Specialist Walker, report to Observation Lounge 3 immediately. Ethan frowned. Nobody summoned maintenance workers to observation lounges, especially not the private ones. He slid out of the shaft and wiped dust from his uniform. 20 minutes later, he stepped through polished glass doors into a room that looked completely out of place aboard Meridian. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the frozen moon below. Soft lighting reflected across dark wooden panels imported from Earth. The air even smelled different. Cleaner. More expensive. Standing near the window was the woman from the docking bay. Up close, she appeared even taller than he remembered. The silver strands of her hair shimmered beneath the lounge lighting. Her elegant dark blue coat carried subtle geometric patterns that shifted when she moved. 2 attendants stood near the entrance, but she raised a hand. They immediately stepped outside, leaving them alone. Ethan stopped several feet away. I'm guessing this is not about a broken air filter. The corner of her mouth lifted slightly. No, although I'm told you are exceptionally good at those. Her voice was calm and melodic. Not theatrical, not superior, just composed. Then how can I help you? Ethan asked. She studied him for a moment. Most people who meet me ask who I am within the first 10 seconds. Ethan shrugged. You seemed busy. For the first time, genuine amusement appeared in her eyes. That is a very human answer. Silence settled between them. Beyond the glass, Karth, 9 rotated slowly beneath the station. White storms drifted across its frozen surface. Finally, she extended her hand. My name is Lyra Voss. Ethan shook it. Her grip was firm. Ethan Walker. I know, that is slightly concerning. Another smile appeared. Small. Real. You repaired a station-wide failure in under 3 minutes. You're not difficult to identify. Ethan folded his arms. So you brought me here to compliment my maintenance records? Lyra glanced toward the window. The smile faded. Actually, I wanted to thank you. Ethan blinked. For fixing the power? For treating me like a person? The answer surprised him. She continued before he could respond. Everyone who approaches me wants something. Influence. Access. Approval. Information. Her gaze remained fixed on the stars. You did not even ask my title. Ethan considered that. Maybe because titles do not tell me much about someone. Her expression softened. Exactly. For several seconds, neither spoke. The station's distant machinery hummed through the walls. Somewhere far below, cargo transports docked and departed. Life continued as it always had. Yet something about the moment felt strangely still. Lyra moved toward a nearby table where 2 cups of coffee waited. Real coffee, not synthetic station substitutes. Ethan raised an eyebrow. That costs more than my monthly food budget. Then I hope it is good. She handed him a cup. Ethan took a cautious sip. His eyes widened. Okay, that is unfairly good. A quiet laugh escaped her. The sound seemed unfamiliar, as though she rarely had reasons to use it. For the next hour they talked. Not about politics, not about treaties, not about power. They talked about Earth rainstorms, about mechanical failures that somehow fixed themselves, about terrible station food and impossible deadlines. And as Ethan listened, he began noticing things no news report could ever capture. The tiredness behind her eyes, the careful way she chose her words, the loneliness hidden beneath perfect composure. By the time the conversation ended, Ethan still did not know why someone as important as Lyra Voss had come to Meridian. But he had learned something more valuable. Sometimes the people surrounded by thousands of admirers were the ones most desperate for a genuine conversation. And as Lyra watched him leave the lounge, she realized something as well. For the first time in years, someone had spoken to her without seeing the title she carried. They had simply seen her. The next week passed faster than Ethan expected. Every morning began with maintenance schedules, repair requests, and system inspections, yet somehow his path kept crossing Lyra Voss's. Sometimes it happened in the observation lounge, overlooking the frozen moon. Sometimes in quiet station corridors where few people ventured. Once, unexpectedly, in a station greenhouse where rows of engineered vegetables grew beneath artificial sunlight. Ethan found her standing there alone, studying a tomato plant as if it were a rare scientific discovery. "You traveled across half the galaxy to look at tomatoes?" he asked. Lyra glanced over her shoulder, amused. "Do not underestimate tomatoes. I have attended diplomatic summits that were far less interesting." Ethan laughed. The sound echoed softly through the greenhouse. It struck him how different she seemed away from her attendants. Around officials, she carried herself with perfect confidence. Around him, she seemed lighter somehow. More relaxed. More real. Over time, he noticed something else. No matter where they met, security personnel always remained nearby. Never intrusive. Never far away. Their presence followed her like a shadow. One afternoon, Ethan finally asked the question that had been bothering him. They sat near one of the station's panoramic windows while transport shuttles drifted between docking platforms. "You know," he said, staring into his coffee cup, "most people do not travel with an army of bodyguards." Lyra smiled faintly. "Most people are luckier than I am." Ethan studied her expression. "That does not really answer the question." "No," she admitted quietly. "It does not." For a moment, he thought she would leave it there. Instead, she looked beyond the glass, toward the distant stars. "Do you ever feel trapped, Ethan?" He frowned. "Trapped? By expectations, responsibilities, other people's ideas of who you should be." Ethan leaned back in his chair. Sometimes, a memory surfaced. The engineering scholarship his family expected him to pursue. The corporate positions he turned down. The promotions he refused because he preferred fixing machines instead of managing people. "But I chose most of my problems." Lyra nodded slowly. "That must be nice." The answer lingered between them. Ethan realized she was not talking about engineering jobs or career decisions. She was talking about something much larger. Before he could ask more, one of her attendants entered the lounge. The woman bowed respectfully. "Ma'am, the council transmission is ready." The relaxed atmosphere vanished instantly. Lyra's posture straightened. The warm expression disappeared behind practiced composure. "Thank you, Mara." The attendant glanced briefly toward Ethan before leaving. Ethan noticed the change immediately. "You should go." Lyra stood but hesitated. "Perhaps." For the first time, she looked genuinely reluctant. "I enjoy these conversations." Ethan smiled. "That makes one of us." Her eyes narrowed playfully. "One. I enjoy them too." I was trying to sound mysterious. A laugh escaped her before she could stop it. Then she shook her head and headed toward the exit. At the doorway, she paused. "Tomorrow evening," she said, "there is a meteor shower visible from the northern observation deck." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You are scheduling star watching?" "I am extending an invitation." "That sounds suspiciously like scheduling." The smile returned. "Then do not be late." After she left, Ethan remained by the window. Something felt different. Not romantic. Not dramatic. Simply important. The kind of connection that formed when two people stopped seeing roles and started seeing reality. Hours later, while Ethan repaired a coolant regulator deep inside the station, every screen across Meridian suddenly activated. Emergency broadcasts replaced routine system data. Workers stopped what they were doing. Conversations died mid-sentence. Ethan climbed down from a maintenance ladder and looked toward the nearest display. A news anchor appeared against the backdrop of a massive governmental chamber. The headline beneath her image froze the entire station. Ethan stared at the screen as the reporter spoke. Then he stared a little longer. Because the woman standing behind the podium in the broadcast was someone he knew. Someone who drank overpriced coffee and studied tomato plants. someone who never introduced herself by title. Supreme Chancellor Lyra Voss, acting leader of the Interstellar Coalition, one of the most influential figures in the known galaxy. And suddenly Ethan understood why she always looked tired. The news spread through Meridian Station faster than any transmission signal. By morning, every maintenance worker, cargo pilot, and dock supervisor knew exactly who Lyra Voss was. Screens displayed her image beside economic reports, diplomatic briefings, and headlines from dozens of worlds. Ethan could hardly walk 50 feet without hearing someone discuss the Supreme Chancellor's unexpected visit. Yet what unsettled him most was not her title. It was the realization that she had never mentioned it. Not once. 2 evenings later, Ethan stood alone on the northern observation deck. The station lights were dimmed to improve visibility. Beyond a reinforced glass, space stretched endlessly in every direction. The frozen moon below reflected pale blue light into the darkness. Above it, thousands of stars shimmered like scattered diamonds. He almost expected Lyra not to come. People with responsibilities measured in star systems rarely had time for meteor showers. Yet exactly on schedule, the deck entrance opened. Lyra stepped inside, wearing a simple dark coat without ceremonial markings. No cameras followed her. No officials accompanied her. Only one security officer remained discreetly outside the door. She approached the observation window and looked upward. "You came," Ethan said. "You sound surprised. You govern half the galaxy." "Only half," she replied. "My advisors will be disappointed by such a modest estimate." Ethan laughed despite himself. The familiar humor eased some of the awkwardness. For several moments, neither spoke. Streams of glowing particles began crossing the distant sky. Tiny streaks of silver and gold burned briefly before vanishing into darkness. The meteor shower had begun. Lyra watched silently. Ethan noticed the tension in her shoulders slowly fading. "You knew I would find out eventually," he said. Her eyes remained on the stars. "Yes, you could have told me." "I could have." Ethan waited. "Why did you not?" The answer took longer than expected. "Because I wanted one conversation that belonged to me." Her voice was quiet. "Not to my office. Not to my government. Not to my title." Ethan looked toward her. The meteor light reflected across her silver hair. "You thought I would treat you differently. Would you not?" He considered the question honestly. "Probably for about 10 minutes. That earned another small smile. "Only 10. Maybe 15. The smile lingered, then disappeared. Most people never move past the first 5 seconds. The meteor shower intensified. Long arcs of light crossed the darkness beyond the station. The observation deck remained silent, except for the faint hum of environmental systems. Ethan finally understood something he had missed before. The loneliness he had noticed was not accidental. It was the cost of power. Every conversation she had was filtered through expectations. Every friendship questioned. Every decision examined. Even simple kindness became suspicious when authority entered the room. "That sounds exhausting," he said. Lyra exhaled slowly. "It is." The honesty surprised them both. For a few seconds, she looked less like a leader and more like someone carrying a burden she could never set down. Then her wrist communicator illuminated. The soft blue glow immediately changed her expression. Professional focus returned. Duty reappeared. She glanced at the incoming message and sighed. "Bad news?" Ethan asked. "Not bad." Her tone suggested otherwise. "Complicated." She deactivated the display. "There's a resource dispute developing in the outer colonies. 3 governments are demanding intervention." Ethan nodded toward the stars. "And instead you're watching rocks burn up in space." For another 5 minutes. The answer carried surprising determination. Ethan smiled. "That might be the most rebellious thing I have ever heard." Lyra laughed softly. The sound faded as another meteor streaked across the darkness. Then she became serious again. "Ethan, may I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why did you stay on Meridian?" He blinked. "What?" "An engineer with your records could work anywhere. Earth, coalition headquarters, private corporations." She turned toward him. "Why here?" Ethan thought about it. The answer was simpler than people expected. "Because things break here." She looked confused. Machines? People? Systems? Communities? Hope sometimes. He shrugged. Out here, fixing something matters. The meteor light reflected in her eyes as she absorbed the answer. For the first time since they met, she seemed genuinely moved. Not by technology, not by politics, by perspective. Neither noticed the security officer receiving an urgent transmission outside the deck. Neither saw the concern spreading across his face. And neither knew that before sunrise, an unexpected crisis would force both of them to discover exactly how much that simple belief was worth. The crisis arrived before dawn. Ethan was halfway through a routine inspection of Meridian's primary thermal exchangers when every maintenance terminal on the station flashed amber. A priority alert scrolled across the screen. External cargo convoy disabled. Life support reserves limited. Civilian transport carrying more than 800 passengers requesting emergency assistance. Ethan stared at the report. The convoy had been traveling through the outer colonies when a chain of equipment failures crippled 3 support vessels. Nothing catastrophic, nothing dramatic, but dangerous enough. Without functioning environmental systems, hundreds of families could find themselves stranded for days in freezing conditions. Meridian immediately became the nearest safe harbor. Within minutes, the station transformed into controlled chaos. Docking schedules vanished. Cargo routes were reassigned. Emergency teams mobilized. Additional sleeping quarters were prepared wherever space could be found. Ethan hurried through crowded corridors carrying diagnostic equipment when he spotted Lyra standing inside the command center. Massive holographic displays floated around her. Advisors spoke rapidly. Data streams updated every second. Yet despite the pressure, her voice remained calm, focused, precise. She listened, asked questions, made decisions. Watching her work was like watching a conductor guide an orchestra through a storm. For the first time, Ethan truly understood why entire worlds trusted her leadership. Then something unexpected happened. One of the station administrators approached Lyra with a concern. Meridian simply did not have enough functioning portable climate units to accommodate every incoming passenger. Additional supplies could arrive eventually, but not before the first transports docked. The administrator proposed prioritizing government personnel and corporate contractors. Ethan saw the suggestion appear on a nearby display. He also saw the expression that crossed Lyra's face. It was not anger. It was disappointment. "No," she said quietly. The room fell silent. "Everyone receives equal accommodation." The administrator hesitated. "Chancellor, that will complicate logistics." "Then we will solve the logistics." Her voice remained calm. "We do not measure dignity by occupation." The sentence lingered in the room long after she finished speaking. Ethan found himself smiling. Later that afternoon, the first damaged convoy arrived. Families emerged carrying bags, blankets, children, and whatever possessions they had managed to bring with them. Exhaustion showed on every face. Volunteers rushed to help. Ethan joined them without hesitation. He spent hours installing temporary heating systems and converting unused storage areas into emergency shelters. At one point, he noticed Lyra doing something that surprised him even more than her decisions inside the command center. She was helping people directly. No cameras, no speeches, no publicity, just carrying supply containers alongside station workers. An elderly passenger struggled with a damaged mobility device. Lyra knelt beside him and helped adjust the controls. A frightened child cried while separated from her parents during processing. Lyra sat with her until the family was reunited. Ethan watched the reactions around her. Most people recognized the Chancellor immediately. Some looked stunned. Others looked confused. A few simply looked grateful. Near midnight, Ethan finally found her in one of the temporary shelter zones. Rows of portable beds stretched across a converted cargo hangar. Soft lighting illuminated hundreds of sleeping passengers. The air smelled faintly of recycled oxygen and fresh coffee. Lyra stood near the entrance, quietly observing the scene. "You should be resting," Ethan said. She glanced toward him. "You should be resting." "I asked first." A tired smile appeared. "Fair point. Together, they looked across the shelter. Families slept peacefully. Volunteers moved quietly between rows. For the first time all day, everything felt stable. You know, Ethan said, most leaders would have delegated all of this. Most engineers would have delegated the heating systems. He laughed. Touché. Silence settled comfortably between them. Then Lyra spoke without looking away from the sleeping crowd. When I was younger, I believed leadership meant being the smartest person in the room. Ethan listened. Now, her gaze softened. Now I think it means remembering that every room is full of people who matter. Ethan did not answer immediately, because for the first time since they met, he realized the tiredness behind her eyes was not caused by power. It was caused by caring, and that was a far heavier thing to carry. By the third day, Meridian Station no longer felt like a remote outpost. It felt like a small city. Temporary shelters filled former cargo bays. Children raced through corridors that normally carried freight containers. Volunteers from a dozen species worked side by side. Somehow, against every prediction, the station was holding together. Ethan Walker spent most of his waking hours repairing systems strained beyond their intended limits. Water recyclers operated at 130% capacity. Environmental processors ran nonstop. Every few hours, another alert appeared somewhere on the network. Yet despite the workload, he found himself noticing something unusual. The people around him seemed calmer than they should have been. Problems remained. Resources were still limited. Hundreds of travelers were far from home. Yet panic never took hold. Late one evening, Ethan finally understood why. He was replacing a damaged circulation pump near Shelter Zone 4 when he noticed a crowd gathered around a portable dining area. Curious, he stepped closer. Lyra sat at one of the folding tables. Not at the head, not on a raised platform, right in the middle of everyone else. A young boy was explaining a complicated drawing made with colored markers. An elderly woman described life on an agricultural moon near the frontier. Two exhausted cargo pilots argued over whose homeworld produced better coffee. Lyra listened to every one of them with complete attention. No ads interruptive. No schedules were mentioned. For almost an hour, she simply sat there and listened. Ethan watched from across the room. Most leaders gave speeches. Lyra collected stories. The difference seemed small until he saw its effect. People walked away smiling, not because their problems were solved, because someone important had treated them as if their experiences mattered. The following morning, Ethan found Lyra alone in the greenhouse. Artificial sunlight poured through transparent panels overhead. Rows of green plants stretched beneath softly humming grow lamps. She stood beside a tomato vine, examining a cluster of ripening fruit. "You keep coming back here," Ethan said. "I am beginning to suspect you actually like tomatoes." Lyra smiled. "Edo. That is disappointing. I thought it was a mysterious political ritual. The galaxy would be much simpler if tomatoes solved political problems." Ethan laughed and joined her beside the growing beds. For a few moments, they stood quietly among the plants. The greenhouse felt strangely peaceful compared to the crowded station beyond its walls. Then Lyra surprised him. "Can I ask you something difficult?" Ethan raised an eyebrow. "That depends how difficult." She looked down at a small green leaf between her fingers. "Do you ever regret choosing kindness?" The question caught him off guard. "That is an oddly specific question." "Please." Ethan thought carefully. "Sometimes kindness creates problems." She nodded. "It certainly does. Sometimes people misunderstand it." Another nod. "Frequently." Ethan leaned against a support rail. "But regret it?" "No." Lyra looked at him. "Why not?" He glanced around the greenhouse. "Because most of the important moments in my life happened after somebody chose kindness when they did not have to." The answer seemed to affect her more deeply than he expected. She remained silent for several seconds. Finally, she spoke. "In politics, people often describe kindness as weakness. Then politics is wrong." The response came so quickly that she blinked. Ethan shrugged. "Being cruel is easy. Being indifferent is easy. Anyone can do that. Kindness costs something. Time, energy, patience." He looked directly at her. "That sounds more like strength to me." Neither spoke after that. The greenhouse filled with the soft hum of ventilation fans. Somewhere nearby, water flowed through irrigation tubes. Lyra turned toward the sunlight, filtering through the glass ceiling. Her expression had changed. Not dramatically, just enough for Ethan to notice. As though a burden she had carried alone for years suddenly felt slightly lighter. Outside the greenhouse, another day of responsibility waited for her. Reports, negotiations, decisions affecting entire worlds. Yet for a brief moment, she simply stood among growing plants and listened to the words of a maintenance engineer from Earth. And for reasons she could not fully explain, those words mattered more than many speeches she had heard inside the grandest halls of government. The emergency seemed to be ending. One by one, repaired convoy vessels completed maintenance. Passenger manifests were updated. Departure schedules reappeared on station displays. For the first time in nearly 2 weeks, Meridian Station felt as though it could finally exhale. Ethan Walker welcomed the change. The endless repairs had left him exhausted. Even the station itself seemed tired. The metallic walls carried the constant hum of overworked systems. Air recyclers rattled through another cycle. Cargolift gruanedvinis skiftingloos. Everything functioned, but only because hundreds of people refused to stop helping one another. Ethan was finishing diagnostics on a power relay when his communicator sounded. Priority level 1. His expression immediately tightened. Priority alerts rarely brought good news. He accepted the transmission. A familiar voice answered. Walker, report to docking ring 3 immediately. It was Mara, one of Lyra's senior aides. What happened? Ethan asked. We do not know yet. Her voice carried unusual tension. Please hurry. 10 minutes later, Ethan arrived at docking ring 3. Security personnel lined the corridor. Technicians crowded around holographic displays. Beyond the reinforced observation glass, Lyra's flagship remained attached to the station. At first, everything appeared normal. Then Ethan noticed the concern on every face. Mara met him near the command terminal. The flagship's primary navigation core failed during pre-departure testing. Ethan frowned. How serious? Serious enough that the ship cannot safely leave orbit. Ethan stepped closer to the diagnostics. Streams of red warning symbols filled the display. The navigation system was not simply malfunctioning. It was trapped inside a cascading software conflict spreading through multiple control layers. Automated repair systems kept making the problem worse. Who has looked at this? Ethan asked. The flagship engineering staff. Coalition Spécialiste. Remote analysts from 3 worlds. Mara folded her arms. None of them have solved it. Ethan stared at the data. Then he sighed. That is either very reassuring or very concerning. Before Mara could answer, another voice spoke behind him. I was hoping you would say reassuring. Ethan turned. Lyra stood nearby. Despite her calm posture, fatigue lingered beneath her eyes. The past weeks had clearly taken a toll. Yet she still managed a small smile. You think I can fix it? Ethan asked. I think you see problems differently. The answer caught him off guard. Around them, advisors continued discussing contingency plans. Alternative transportation. Diplomatic delays. Emergency scheduling revisions. Everyone focused on the enormous political consequences of the failure. Everyone except Lyra. She was watching him. Not because he held authority. Not because he possessed status. Because she trusted him. Ethan returned his attention to the diagnostics. Minutes passed. Then 30. Then 60. Engineers rotated through the room, carrying reports and system updates. Gradually, a pattern emerged. The navigation core itself was not broken. The automated optimization software kept rewriting stable settings in pursuit of impossible efficiency gains. A machine was creating problems because it refused to accept a good enough solution. Ethan finally leaned back. Found it. Several heads turned immediately. Mara stepped closer. Already, the ship is too smart. Silence followed. Mara blinked. I am sorry. Ethan pointed toward the display. The optimization network keeps chasing perfect calculations. Every adjustment creates another adjustment. It never settles. One of the flagship engineers frowned. "You are suggesting we reduce system intelligence." "I am suggesting you let the ship be wrong occasionally." The room remained silent. Then Lyra laughed. A genuine laugh. Warm. Unexpected. "That sounds remarkably familiar." Ethan smiled. "Maybe machines and politicians have more in common than people think." 2 hours later, the repair was complete. The navigation core stabilized. Departure clearance returned. Relief spread across the command center. Yet while everyone celebrated the technical solution, Lyra found herself thinking about something else entirely. Ethan had not rushed toward recognition. He had not demanded credit. He had simply seen a problem and helped solve it. Once again, the same way he fixed the station lights. The same way he helped stranded families. The same way he treated people. And standing there amid blinking consoles and relieved engineers, Lyra realized a truth she had spent years searching for. Character was easiest to recognize in ordinary moments. The morning of Lyra's departure arrived beneath a sky of distant stars and fading traffic signals. Across Meridian Station, temporary shelters stood nearly empty. Families boarded repair transports. Emergency operations slowly gave way to ordinary routines. The crisis that had transformed the station into a refuge was finally ending. Ethan Walker should have felt relieved. Instead, he found himself lingering over simple tasks, taking longer routes through familiar corridors, delaying the inevitable realization that everything was about to return to normal. He was recalibrating environmental sensors near docking ring 3 when station-wide communication screens activated simultaneously. Workers paused. Travelers stopped mid-conversation. Every display showed the central assembly chamber aboard Lyra's flagship. Ethan glanced up only briefly at first. Then he froze. The chamber was crowded with coalition officials, military representatives, economic advisors, and delegates from dozens of worlds. It looked less like a shipboard meeting and more like a gathering of governments. At the center stood Lyra, calm, composed, every bit the leader the galaxy believed her to be. Ethan assumed she was delivering a standard departure address. Then he noticed the expressions on the faces around her. Surprise, confusion, even concern. Something unusual was happening. Lyra stepped toward the central podium. Her voice carried across every screen on Meridian. "Before departing Karth 9, I wish to make a formal announcement." Conversations throughout the station stopped completely. For years, the Coalition has measured success through production, expansion, efficiency, and growth. She paused. Those things matter, but they are not enough. Delegates exchanged uncertain looks. Ethan folded his arms and listened. During my time aboard Meridian Station, I witnessed hundreds of individuals working together without concern for status, species, or position. Engineers, dock workers, medical staff, volunteers, families. Her gaze moved across the chamber. They reminded me of something our institutions sometimes forget. The silence deepened. Communities survive because ordinary people choose to care. Ethan felt an uncomfortable sensation in his chest. A suspicion. Lyra continued. "Today, I am establishing the Meridian Initiative, a coalition-wide program dedicated to supporting remote settlements, emergency response networks, and civilian infrastructure throughout frontier systems." Murmurs spread through the audience. Several advisors immediately began reviewing documents on their tablets. Others looked stunned. The initiative represented a massive commitment of resources. Then Lyra said something no one expected. The program was inspired not by governments or councils, but by the example of a maintenance engineer who never realized anyone was watching. Ethan stared at the screen. Around him, workers slowly turned in his direction. His first instinct was to disappear into the nearest maintenance hatch. Unfortunately, it was too late. Lyra's expression softened. He repaired problems because they needed repairing. He helped people because they needed help. He reminded me that leadership begins with service. The chamber remained silent. So did the station. Ethan wished the floor would open beneath him. Instead, he stood motionless while every screen continued broadcasting. History often celebrates extraordinary individuals, Lyra said. But civilizations are built by ordinary ones. For a brief moment her eyes seemed to meet the camera itself. The galaxy does not need more people seeking importance. It needs more people willing to matter. The transmission ended. Screens returned to normal operations. Yet nobody moved. Not immediately. Finally, a cargo supervisor nearby looked toward Ethan. You did not mention you were reorganizing galactic policy. Laughter rippled through the corridor. Ethan rubbed a hand across his face. I fixed a navigation system. But deep down, he understood the truth. The speech had never been about him. It had been about an idea, a belief. The same belief he carried into every repair, every conversation, every decision. That people mattered. And somewhere beyond the station walls, aboard a departing flagship preparing to cross the stars, a leader had chosen to carry that belief forward. 3 months later, Meridian Station looked exactly the same. The same aging corridors, the same humming generators, the same observation windows staring into endless darkness. Cargo containers still moved through docking bays. Maintenance requests still arrived faster than Ethan Walker could complete them. On the surface, nothing had changed. Yet sometimes the biggest changes happened quietly. The Meridian Initiative spread across frontier systems faster than anyone expected. New supply networks appeared on forgotten colonies. Emergency response stations were built in regions that had spent decades overlooked by distant governments. Independent settlements received support previously reserved for major trade hubs. Ethan saw reports occasionally, usually while eating lunch or waiting for diagnostics to finish. He never paid much attention to the articles mentioning his name. They always felt exaggerated. He was still the same engineer repairing the same equipment. One evening, he found himself back in a northern observation deck. The station had entered its artificial night cycle. Most personnel were asleep. Beyond the glass, stars stretched across infinity. Ethan stood alone with a cup of coffee in his hands. The silence felt familiar, comfortable. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. His communicator displayed an incoming priority transmission. He frowned. Priority messages rarely arrived at this hour. Accepting the call, he expected another equipment problem. Instead, a holographic image appeared above the device. Lyra Voss smiled from the projection. Good evening, Ethan. He stared for a second. You know, most people send messages. Most people are not Supreme Chancellor. That is a terrible excuse. Her laugh filled the quiet observation deck. Somehow it sounded lighter than before. Less burdened. How is Meridian? She asked. Ethan glanced around, still breaking in creative ways. Good. I would have worried if everything worked properly. For several minutes they talked, as they always had. Not about politics, not about government, about ordinary things. New greenhouse projects, strange station rumors, a shipment of coffee that mysteriously vanished before reaching storage. The conversation felt effortless despite the distance separating them. Finally, Lyra became quiet. Behind her, large windows revealed the lights of Coalition headquarters orbiting a distant world. I wanted to thank you, she said. Ethan groaned immediately. We already had this conversation. Not for fixing anything. Her expression softened. For reminding me of something I nearly forgot. Ethan remained silent. When people spend enough time around power, she continued, they begin believing change only comes from important places. Her gaze met his through the hologram. But the truth is simpler. It begins wherever someone chooses to care. Ethan looked away toward the stars. The words felt larger than either of them. Not because they were profound, because they were true. A comfortable silence followed. Neither rushed to fill it. Beyond the observation glass, distant starlight reflected across the frozen curve of Karth 9. The same moon that had been there when they first met. The same stars. The same station. Yet somehow everything felt different. Lyra finally smiled. I should return to work. Probably. Try not to reorganize galactic policy while I am gone. Ethan shook his head. No promises. The connection ended. Her hologram faded. The observation deck became quiet once more. Ethan remained by the window long after the transmission disappeared. Far away, somewhere among countless stars, a leader guided the future of the galaxy. Here, on an aging station above a frozen moon, an engineer prepared for another ordinary shift. Different lives, different responsibilities, different worlds, yet connected by a simple truth neither would ever forget. The galaxy admired power because power changed systems. But kindness changed people. And in the end, people were the ones who changed the galaxy.